Okay, we're here, we're live. Hi everybody, good afternoon. I have the pleasure of Joe Kimok being here. He is running for Broward County State Attorney.
Yes,
when does the elections, when are the actual elections?
The primary is August 18th, 2020. There'll be about 10 days of early voting before that. And the general is November 3rd, 2020.
And he's here. I wanted to really get down to the nitty-gritty about some issues that really affect my clients. And of course, if anyone has any questions or comments or whatever, feel free to type them in. And we have a candidate that came here to address our issues. So I'm so happy to be able to talk with you.
Well, thank you
about
for having
that.
me. It's a privilege to be here.
And you want to go ahead and plug in your website now if people want to learn more about you?
Yeah,
we'll do it at the end.
Absolutely. We have a website, www.joekimok.com. It's JOEKIMOK.com. You can also check out our Facebook page, which is tagged right here. It's got a whole bunch of stuff on everything that we stand for in dismantling mass incarceration and building a new justice system going forward.
So I kind of first want to get some information about you as a person and your family and things like that. Are you originally from Broward County or?
I have been living in Broward since 2010. I was actually born in West Palm.
Okay.
My parents moved around a lot when we were kids, around the country really. When my parents got divorced when I was 7, it left my mom to raise 3 kids on her own as a single parent without a job. And so we ended up moving in with my grandparents in upstate New York for a couple of years. We lived in their basement. There were 4 of us living in one room in their basement for a couple of years. And so I was really kind of raised on, food stamps, free school lunches, all of that. When I graduated high school.
Okay, sorry.
You're still alive. Okay. When I graduated high school, I went to FSU for undergrad. After undergrad, I moved to Texas for a few years, where I taught high school taught high school English at a low-income inner-city school there. Went to law school, and I've been back here since I graduated law school in 2010.
Okay, awesome. And can you kind of tell our audience what you do right now?
Sure. I am a criminal defense lawyer. I work for a state agency called the Office of Criminal Conflict and Civil Regional Counsel. We only represent folks that can't afford a lawyer. And so it's a lot like the public defender's office, only we take cases that the public defender's office can't take for whatever reason, for what's called a legal conflict. So I represent folks charged with everything from misdemeanors all the way up to homicides. I have a couple of clients that are facing the death penalty. I do most of our serious crimes in the office. It is the best job I've ever had. I love being able to work with real people and families and being able to help folks out. But I know that for every one person that I'm able to help, there are 100 people that are swallowed by the system that who will bear the consequences of this system for decades to come.
And I thought that was really interesting when you were talking about how for every one person that you can help, there's tons of other people that are being swallowed by the system. And so I think the main question that a lot of people would, or at least in my mind, would want to know from you, you do defense work now, but now you're running for a state attorney. So what makes what you do, why would someone want to vote for you with your background?
Sure. We have had 4 decades now of mass incarceration, and it's been perpetrated on us because our elected district and state attorneys have run on tough on crime platforms. They've used fear as a way to get elected and then stay elected and then lock up entire generations of mostly black men. And so we have whole families with parents that are in jail, communities that have suffered the economic consequences of mass incarceration, and it hasn't worked. It hasn't kept us safe. It hasn't reduced crime. And so I think if we really want to completely dismantle that system, we need somebody who has been, who works in the trenches every day, fighting it from the ground up. I'm the only candidate in this race that is actively, exclusively representing indigent clients now, and that's by design. That's purposeful, and so there are some career prosecutors in the race. There's an elected official in the race. There's some civil lawyers in the race. Nobody who does what I do. And I think if we don't want to just nibble around the edges of a system that is profoundly immoral, we need somebody who's willing to upset the whole apple cart.
And I think for those people that came in through or have been continuously voting the way that they have been voting, I think their main concern is, well, why would I vote for you because I'm scared for my safety or whatever. So what would you say to those people that strongly believe in law and order, or however you want to phrase it? I think you understand what I'm trying to say, but what would you say to those people to get them to understand why you are the candidate that could address those issues?
That the status quo isn't working. The status quo hasn't kept you safe. We have done this for 40 years now. We know that putting nonviolent people in prison, not giving them any real resources, and then spitting them out makes them more violent, makes them more of a danger to our community. We know that the absolute best way to reduce crime is to reduce poverty. Our system does the exact opposite. It drives folks deeper into poverty. And there's also we're having this discussion about what safety means, right?
People don't understand.
For forever, at least since the 1960s and 70s, we have been taught that safety means locking as many people up as we possibly can, so that the rest of us feel safe. But that isn't safety. When you lock somebody in a jail cell, that person isn't safe. Putting somebody in prison is an act of violence against that person. Putting the government control over somebody through probation or parole, and driving them deeper into poverty doesn't keep any of us safe. When a young black teenager is walking down the street and he is rightfully afraid of being harassed by police, or driving in their own neighborhood and being afraid of being harassed by police, that doesn't make us safe. And so none of us are safe. And so it's very much a discussion of what we are doing now is very much making us less safe, and our definition of safety needs to evolve a little bit.
I would agree with you there. And so now I'm going to get into some really direct issues that I feel like affect my clients. And for a person that's still on the fence about voting, that come from either my community or otherwise, I want them to really be able to hone in on some of the issues, which I think you can agree with me too, kind of affect most of our clients. Right. So the first thing I wanted to talk to you is if you are elected as state attorney, what is your position on bail bonds and bonds being offered and extended to violent and non-violent accused people that have been charged with crimes?
So I'm the only candidate in the race that has called to completely get rid of the cash bond. We will end cash bond on day one. There are some folks in the race who say we need to end it just for nonviolent misdemeanors.
Right, which is why I directly asked you about the nonviolent versus the violent.
Right. So just a little bit about what she's talking about, right? If anybody is if you or a loved one are arrested, the vast majority of those folks will go before a magistrate, and the magistrate will literally put a dollar amount that you have to pay in order to get out of jail. If you can afford it, you can get out and fight your case from the outside. If you can't afford it, you sit in jail until your case is resolved. You are legally innocent. The Constitution says you are presumed innocent, and yet you sit in jail. Even for those folks who can afford the bond, a lot of times they have to make the decision of, do I pay rent this month, or do I bond my son or daughter out of jail? For me, I can tell you there isn't a dollar amount that I wouldn't spend to get my wife out of jail, even for one night. And so it drives folks deeper into poverty. In fact, we know from research that black women overwhelmingly bear the economic brunt of cash bail when folks are able to afford cash bail. And so what we have said is this system doesn't do anything to keep us safe, and in fact it only drives folks deeper into poverty. And so we have called, on day one, we have said we will no longer ask for cash bail for any offense. And so then folks say, well, what about violent criminals?
Sure.
You know, we want to make sure violent criminals are locked up. And that's correct. We want to make sure that we protect the community, but we do a violence analysis, not a how much money is in your bank account analysis. And so what we have said is, look, for the vast majority of crimes, we're going to ROR you. You're going to be let out, you're going to be given a court date. We know from experiences in other cities that folks show up to court, they don't recidivate when we eliminate cash bail. For those folks who we might have a concern about, then we start talking about putting them on pretrial, putting them on house arrest, or in extreme cases, moving for what's called pretrial detention. There's a statute in Florida that allows the state attorney to request that a particularly dangerous person be held pretrial. We have to be careful with how we do that, right? Because even those folks are presumed innocent. And so we don't want to just replace the cash bail system with a pretrial system that monitors more people. But we do it in a way that both that eliminates cash bond and also decreases our reliance on pretrial, and really only have those conversations about monitoring somebody prior to trial for those folks that have a documented, provable, ongoing problem with violence that we feel is absolutely necessary to do to protect the community from them.
And just to be clear, Joe hit on a really important thing that I think a lot of times people rarely do, or rarely even as defense attorneys, we rarely have pretrial detention hearings.
Yeah.
And so, but I want to be clear in the sense that what you're saying is, for the pretrial detention hearing, there will be a hearing that a
Correct.
judge will make a decision on. So it's not just a person is being detained pretrial for pretrial. There's actually a hearing. There's evidence put on in that hearing by the defense attorney and by the state of Florida. And there are arguments that go back and forth in regards to a person's risk. Whether or not they have a job, their educational history, ties to the community, and the actual allegations that are before this court. So it is a hearing.
Right, and it's actual due process,
Yes,
right? The person accused gets to have their opportunity to show why they are not a risk and present evidence. Right now, all we're doing for folks that a judge may think is a risk, they're just setting a bond at $300,000 and calling it a day, without having any kind of real discussion or due process opportunity for the person charged to show, no, I'm not a risk.
Okay. And I think a lot of us have heard, Broward County has been in the media so much lately regarding, deaths that are caused by whether it be mental illness or women of color that are pregnant, that are actually giving birth in a jail. And so this kind of segues from the bail discussion, but I don't know if you want to speak to those women of color out there, or the women that may be pregnant and got arrested or whatever, wherever they are at on the spectrum. But I do serve women, and one thing that I'll say to you is, and which you already know, is that women tend to get left behind in this system. It's really largely male dominated for whatever reason, but when women are incarcerated, it kind of has a collateral effect in a lot of ways that goes unnoticed. And so could you just speak to that just real quickly?
I mean, women are the largest growing demographic in our prison population. Men have remained, for the last 10 years, men have remained largely stagnant as far as new prison admissions. women have continued to go up.
I know that.
80% of women that are incarcerated are mothers, and so when you incarcerate a mother, you're also having a profound impact on that family. I just a few months ago, talking about cash bond, I represented a woman charged with stealing a car. She was found in a car that was stolen, that was being driven by her boyfriend. She had great defenses to the case, but she was in custody, unable to afford her bond, and she was 7 months pregnant. And there was very much an opportunity for me to file a bond motion to try to get her out, but they offered her probation, and it was right after Tammy Jackson had the Tammy Jackson incident, and she immediately took the probation because she was scared to death of being in jail while being pregnant. And so it's a profound problem that to me really starts with mass incarceration to begin with, right? If we lock up fewer people overall, then that's gonna have a real impact on making sure that we're not locking up pregnant women, mentally ill women, and so on and so forth. But the Broward Sheriff's Office has to do a better job with the folks that are in there. There's just no reason for a 8-month pregnant woman to be in jail at all. Period. I mean, I don't care what you're charged with. The idea that somebody like that is, my wife is 8 months pregnant right now, and I can tell you she can barely get off the couch.
Let alone
she's working. She's a law firm partner. She's still kicking ass. But so we just have. But again, it goes back to we're not having that discussion about dangerousness when we're locking folks up. We're having the wrong discussions,
and they're out of turn too. Yeah, right. We often lock up, and then later on have a discussion about the dangerousness that the person poses. And I also wanted to talk to you about my legal background. I used to be a prosecutor prior to switching and becoming a criminal defense attorney in Dade County. And one thing that I can noticeably spot when I started practicing here in Broward was that a lot of these prosecutors or assistant state attorneys have zero discretion. And I think that just complicates our process so much more. And so even a lot of my clients, I kind of go to them, I have to give them that talk. Listen, we're waiting on so-and-so to approve whatever. And so I think that's probably, from my perspective, the biggest issue that I see in Broward County. Have you thought about that? And if you have put thought to that, what do you want to do in your position as state attorney if elected? Yeah,
and so just what she's talking about is this. If you're charged with an offense, for every single offense, there is a minimum offer that what are called line prosecutors, the assistant state attorneys, can make. They can make any offer that's higher than that they want, all the way up to the maximum. But they can't offer anything below that. And so, for example, if you're charged with burglary, first time you've ever been arrested, that minimum offer is going to be the bottom of the guidelines, which is going to be about 21 months in prison. The line prosecutor has to offer you 21 months.
Has to.
Or over. Right. If you want to get less than that, you have to jump through 10 different hoops, go to a supervisor, show all this legal basis for why it should be a lesser offer. A discussion of justice is never really had. It's never, hey, this is the right thing to do. It is very much a legal discussion that's had. What we have said is we're going to flip the discretion, okay? And so if we really want to dismantle mass incarceration, we have to do something about these astronomically huge sentences that we're seeing, both as results of plea and after trial. And the way that we do that is by limiting what the offer can be on the tail end. And so what we would say is this. If you're charged with a burglary, the maximum that the prosecutor can offer you is 21 months. That prosecutor can offer you probation, can change the charge, can dismiss the case, can create a diversion program for you in the interest of justice. But if the prosecutor wants to offer you any prison time, they have to justify it in writing, and tell the people how much that's going to cost the state of Florida. And if they want to go over that maximum, they have to get approval to do that, right? And have a real justified reason as to why that should happen. That's what Larry Krasner is doing in Philadelphia. He's was one of the very first progressive district attorneys to be elected across the country, and it's worked. They've seen prison. They've not only seen a dramatic decline in new prison admissions, but even for those folks that are going to prison, they've seen a shrinking of prison length, and that's really important, right? So we know that most folks age out of crime by the time they hit 40, and yet we, especially with kids in their 20s, we have no problem throwing around numbers like 20, 30, 40 years in prison for stuff, far beyond anything that whatever the crime calls for. And so, so now in order to do that, we have to hire really, really good people. We have to hire people that we trust, that we understand, that view their job as being like a civil rights lawyer as opposed to just punishing somebody, who's willing to be creative to help folks, get the justice that they need, while also helping folks that have been arrested get the help that they need so that we don't reoffend. Takes a lot of creativity, but that's what the job should be, right? Right now, the prosecutors are just factory workers. They just push cases in the system.
Yeah, and I like that approach as well, because no matter which end of the spectrum you are, whether you're the court, whether you're the prosecutor, whether you're the defense attorney, our system works better when everyone works together. It just does. It really does. So I like that approach. Another thing that I care about as well is juveniles. Joe just so happened to post, I think you made a post yesterday, and you had took a picture of the children that you've seen that I think they were being transported or something like that.
They were leaving the jail, to be transferred back to the detention center.
And so I wanted to talk to you about that. If you're elected as the state attorney of Broward County, what is your position on juvenile justice and juvenile justice reform?
The juvenile justice system is the most broken out of all of it. I know that's hard to imagine because the adult criminal justice system, criminal legal system is so bad, but the juvenile court needs a complete upending and just to start from fresh. Couple of issues. One, Florida direct files, which means Florida charges more kids as adults than any other state in the nation, and the next state isn't even close. The next state is Oregon. Florida is like head and shoulders above them. I'm opposed to direct file in all cases. I don't believe that the prosecutor should have the unilateral discretion to charge a child as an adult. The racial disparities with charging kids as adults are even significantly worse than the racial disparities in the adult system are. And we know that, the second we bring a kid into an adult jail, their likelihood of reoffending skyrockets whenever they get out. Kids are going into these jails, they're coming out abused, neglected, uneducated because we don't have a good education system in there, and sometimes they're coming out dead. We had the very high-profile incident again last year of a 17-year-old kid who was direct filed who hung himself in the Broward County Jail. And so, if there is one of those extreme cases, a 17-year-old who murders a bunch of people, where we feel like sending a kid to an adult system is absolutely necessary for the long-term safety of the public, then we take it to a grand jury. We have a hearing in front of a grand jury so that at least there's some due process for that kid. I know I'm imperfect. Obviously, whoever is the next state attorney is going to be imperfect. But we have to give as much, especially with kids, we got to give as much due process as possible. Second, we need to end pretrial incarceration for kids. Mm-hmm. Right now, what we're doing is kids are getting arrested. They're put into a formula, basically. Yeah. The formula spits out a number, and if the number's high enough, the kids are put in a detention center for 21 days. Mm-hmm. They are legally innocent. They are presumed innocent, and they're put in this detention center for 21 days. And then the case drags on for usually a couple of months, sometimes longer. But the kids see the 21 days as the punishment, not whatever ends up happening at the tail end of the case. I don't believe that pretrial incarceration, we know that it doesn't work. We know that kids are being abused in the Broward Detention Center. And so I've made a commitment by the end of my first term to have 0 kids incarcerated pretrial. Now that's hard. That isn't a snap of the fingers decision that can be made. We've got kids who don't have homes to go home to. We've got kids who may have homes to go home to, but they're dangerous, whatever. And so we have to heavily invest in community treatment, therapy treatment-based programs that are better alternatives to what we have now. And then third is, with kids, diversion should be the rule, not the exception. Should be that with adults too, but especially with kids. There's no rehabilitative or treatment program that you can give a kid by prosecuting them that you can't give them by diverting them. And diverting them keeps that record off of their record, right? Keeps the crime off of their record. We know that 90% of kids that are incarcerated across the country have experienced significant trauma, and yet our system isn't doing any kind of trauma-based therapy. We have in Broward County, we have some diversion for kids. If you've ever been in trouble before, you're disqualified, and it only is allowed for a small number of nonviolent offenses. We think that diversion should be available for almost everything, particularly cases where kids are acting out, like robberies and burglaries, for example. Those are extraordinary opportunities for us to get kids when they're young, to give them intensive, robust rehabilitation, to decrease in a way that will decrease our crime, 5-10 years from now. We're not doing that right now. We're just putting them into the system, spitting them back out, telling them to do some community service hours and be on their way, and then saddling them with a conviction at the end. If we can get that right, if we can rebuild our juvenile justice system in a way that treats each kid individually, that designs a therapy program or whatever is needed, if intervention is needed, for each individual kid, that will have the opportunity to keep us, all of us, safer 5, 10, 15 years down the road.
I agree with you there. Another thing that I feel like plagues a lot, probably about 99% of my clients, is mental health and substance abuse. And I know right now Broward County, they have a mental health court, a drug court, and a veterans court, if I'm not mistaken. I think those are the 3 that they have. And we all know the judges that are on those benches, and they do a phenomenal job. Is there anything that you would add or a supplement to the current diversion or voluntary courts that we have now?
Yes. We'll start with drug court. Too many of the cases that are in drug court don't need to be there. And drug court is an extraordinary intervention in somebody's life, makes their life very, very difficult. So what we have said is this. For possession, we're not going to charge possession of marijuana. ever, any amount. No one should ever sit in a jail cell. The coffee I had this morning or the glass of wine that I'll have for dinner tonight is worse for me than marijuana is, and it is profoundly immoral to put somebody in a cell for possession of marijuana. For the other drugs, we have a tiered diversion system. First of all, we incentivize law enforcement not to arrest these folks when they come into contact with them, to if they determine that it's needed, to take them to rehabilitation, not to jail. For those folks that are arrested, if you're arrested for possession offense the first time, we're going to tell you to stay out of trouble for 6 months. If you stay out of trouble and don't test positive, we're going to drop your case. We're not even going to file the case during that time, so it's not filed. If you get in trouble if you get caught a second time, that shows us there might be an addiction issue there. We're going to tell you need to enter a rehabilitation program, a treatment program. You finish a treatment program, don't get in any trouble, we dismiss the case. Right? If you get arrested a third time, then we're going to send you to drug court. And the drug court is, like you said, it's an intensive, robust rehabilitation program that really stay on you. For those folks, we think that they probably need that. You finish drug court, we're going to dismiss the case. We're not going to put any kind of cap on how many opportunities you have to go into drug court, because we know that treatment is not treatment isn't always a straight line up, that folks relapse. And so we want to give you as many opportunities to do that as possible. We think that, again, by the end of our first term, we can have 0 possession prosecutions. This is for folks who suffer from drug misuse or drug abuse, this is a public health problem. It's not a criminal justice problem. There may be ways that the criminal justice system can help folks, which is why we kind of set this tiered program up. But it shouldn't saddle folks with visits to jail or criminal convictions.
No, I agree. And my last question that I really wanted you to speak to is, in terms of Broward County taking the position on investigating cases post-conviction wise, where there are allegations that a person did not commit a crime or whatever. Can you speak to that, and what's your position on that?
Well, I announced that I was running for state attorney in March of 2019. At that time, the current state attorney had been in office for 42 years. He had always resisted any kind of attempts to investigate prior convictions, even though there are many folks that have been proven innocent during his tenure. So I announced in March, and then with creating a conviction integrity unit as one of the key parts of our platform. In July, the state attorney announced that he was creating a conviction integrity unit, which is great. It's a great first step.
Right.
It is run by a woman that was a former prosecutor and attorney general. It's not as funded as it needs to be. That she doesn't have independent investigators, so it needs to be fully funded. But we've had, it'll be 44 years of one state attorney with one mindset. We know there are innocent people in Florida's prisons right now that were put there by this state attorney. We need a well-functioning, well-financed, true conviction integrity unit to investigate those cases and find them. But we need to do better than that. There are lots and lots of people in prison who were guilty, but whose sentences are astronomically longer than needed to be. Folks that suffered through, who got slapped with huge mandatory minimums during the drug war. Folks who were offered probation or small amounts of prison time prior to trial, but decided to go to trial and lost, and then got hit with 30, 40, 50 or life sentences. And so, and then we have a whole bunch of people living in the community right now with criminal convictions hanging over their heads for folks, for stuff that is either not a crime now or may not be a crime in the near future, like possession of marijuana. And so what we said is we're going to create a sentence review unit.
Oh, that's the first time I've ever heard that, actually. Okay.
To look at these draconian sentences of folks that are in prison, and try and find legal, unique ways to either vacate their sentence or reduce their sentence. And then also to help folks get their conviction, folks that are in the community, get those convictions vacated, so that they can, move on with their lives and not have this saddled on their record.
I love that. That was honestly all of the really hard hitting questions that I wanted to ask. And what I'll say is that Joe has been the only person that's reached out to me personally. Not that I'm some whatever, but you've been the...
Don't sell yourself
short. But he's been the only candidate for state attorney here in Broward County that has personally reached out to me about the issues that concern our community and both of our clients, really. So I just want to thank you for that. And I wanted to give you another opportunity to plug your website, plug all of your information, and address what you need to do.
We're doing I think this is our 12th or 13th video. We're the only campaign that's doing these. We're doing them with folks all over Broward County because we know it's really, really important for everyone, voters, to know where the next state attorney stands on all of the issues. Transparency is nowhere more important than in this race, and this race is very much the most important race in the lives of everyday people in our county this year. So if you want to do a video like this, whether you know me or not, message the campaign. The Facebook tag is right there. You can also email us at joekimok2020@gmail.com. We have a website, www.joekimok.com. Any way you can get to us. We need volunteers. We need donations. We need anybody who's kind of willing to do anything to help us get the word out.
And then your website, did you already say it?
Yeah, www.joekimok.com.
Make sure that you're registered to vote. Make sure you have proper identification when you go to vote. Also know that in early voting, it's usually easier to vote. You don't have to wait as long. So just make sure that you have all your documentation in order prior to voting. Understand that this seat that he is running for is one of the most important seats here in this county. A lot of people underestimate the power of a prosecutor in a courtroom and the type of discretion that they have. So I really want to congratulate you on having the courage to be here and talk about your issues here on this platform. So
thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you everybody for checking in, and I think that's it. All right, thank you. Take care, everybody. Everybody's saying hi. Okay, I can't. All right, everybody's saying hi, Joe. Janito's saying hi. Manisha. Ava. Hi, Beverly. These are a lot of my folks. All right, bye, everybody. It won't go off.
You hit it too high.
Okay.